Mr. Griffin, are you?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate it. It was great to hear my colleagues say that they would never use Medicare or Social Security to scare people. That make sure your party leadership knows that. That'll probably be a news flash. Mr. Blahouse, I want to ask you, from a practical standpoint, let's say we get to the point where the trust fund does not have the money to pay out. I think a lot of people, a lot of Americans sort of feel like, yeah, well, on paper that will happen at some point, but maybe my benefits will never be affected because we'll just borrow it, right? So I want you to walk me through what the practical impact would be in terms of where the money would come from if there aren't benefit cuts. So I assume we would have to find in general revenue the money to shore up the fund, the way sort of we've done with the Highway Trust Fund. That would come out of discretionary funds, and we wouldn't have that money most likely. So that would be borrowed. Could you sort of walk through what the practical implications of that would be? Could we even borrow that much? How much money are we talking about borrowing when this point when we get to the point where we don't have enough money to pay out, and all the bad things that we've heard, benefits be cut and all that? What would we have to do if reforms do not occur? What would we have to do to continue on the path that we're on?
Right. At the point where the combined trust funds, assuming we reallocate taxes between the trust funds and then they're depleted in 2033, one of the common methods that the trustees use to describe quantities within the Social Security system is as a percentage of the program's tax base. So, for example, in 1983, when we had a shortfall to close, the long-term shortfall was described as 1.8% of the program's tax base. In order to fill that, they delayed the COLAs by 6 months. They exposed benefits to taxation for the first time. They brought in newly hired federal employees. They raised their eligibility age, et cetera. They did all these things, and that added up to about 1.8% of the tax base. And they did about half of it on each side, half of it on the revenue side, half of it on the benefit side. If we wait till 2033, our shortfall, our annual shortfall, will be about 4.2% of taxable payroll. So we would have to make changes. Again, hitting the admonition, not wanting to scare people, but you have to make changes over twice as severe, about 2.5 times as severe. And the question is, would our political system, would people on the right be over twice as willing to raise taxes as they've ever been willing to do before? Would people on the left be over twice as willing to cut benefits? Both of them twice as willing.
What about people who'd say, well, we would, I'm not advocating this, but we would just borrow that money?
Well, this is
how much are we talking about here?
Right. Well, yeah, exactly. It's over. Again, it's in dollar figures. It's going to be much bigger because we're looking way into the future, and so that's why we tend to do it as a percentage of GDP or as a percent of taxable payroll. But you'd have to borrow, if you wanted to do it through borrowing, you'd have to borrow an amount that's equal to over 4% of what workers are earning, and that's a tremendous amount of money.
Right.
And
that's not an option, is the point. Is that what you're saying?
Well,
in terms of getting that money, borrowing that sort of money, adding that to the debt.
My personal view, and this is not necessarily a consensus view among experts, my personal view is that at that point it's a bridge too far to balance system finances, and we wouldn't be able politically to sustain the system without turning it into a program that's financed from the general fund. And then we'd lose a lot of the things that have made Social Security a stable, reliable benefit over the years.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's scary to me. I'm not a senior yet. Hope I make that, but that's scary to me in and of itself. Let me ask you real quickly, could you talk a little bit about our culture and the role that Social Security played in the early days versus now, in terms of whether people had in the early days other sources of income for retirement versus today? Has there been a movement, and I think I know the answer to this, has there been a movement over the years to rely solely on Social Security for a bigger percentage of the population, or is it the same general I'd like to know that. I see you shaking your head.
I think the first point I'd make is that if we still had the system that was left to us by FDR, we wouldn't have a financial shortfall right now. It's the subsequent expansions that have put us in financial trouble. We added the disability component later on. Perhaps it was an appropriate thing to do. Then we added early eligibility. People are now collecting at 62 more often than any other age. Originally, they could only collect at 65. So we're collecting 3 years earlier, and we're living a lot longer. And then in the 1970s, we added a 20% benefit increase, and we started wage indexing the benefits. And so now we have cost issues that we didn't have under the original design of Social Security. So when people talk about sort of the historic legacy of Social Security, it's not the FDR legacy that is really in jeopardy. The program he left to us is stable. It's the subsequent expansions that are causing us the trouble.
I'm out of time, Mr. Schreiber, but the chairman, in his mercy, might allow you to
Well,
respond.
in 2008, there were $532.87 billion paid in Social Security benefits. The combined IRA and pension annuity benefits paid to Social Security beneficiaries was $568 billion. So the benefits paid out of pensions and IRAs was actually larger than Social Security benefits. Last year, we got tax data on both of them, and none of these tax qualified benefits existed, or very minuscule amounts of them existed in the 1930s. So there's a much greater dependence now on these tax qualified benefits, people's personal savings or personal pensions, than we've had in the past. Of course, we haven't been reporting it. We've only been reporting 40% of it. So we have no, in terms of what you've been told, or generally being told, you have no idea what this other part of the retirement system is really about. And it would seem to me that might be important when you think about retirement income security.
Thank you.